Joining us for a little bit is Ms. Debbie Meaux. She is president of the Louisiana Association of Educators. Hey, Ms. Debbie, how are you today?
I am doing well. Thank you very much.
Your people sent a couple of emails setting up the interview, and they said that you were doing a lot of interviews and you had a lot of things to say about the current state of education in Louisiana and the problems and challenges facing the schools. So let's start macro. What are the biggest challenges facing Louisiana schools right now before we go back to school in the fall?
I think right now the biggest obstacle that our schools have is funding. And that has been true for a number of years. But we have to, in Louisiana, find ways to make sure that our children are being resourced so that they can have the best possible education that we can offer them.
Now, pardon me, I'm sure you get this all the time, especially from legislators at every level, that you can look across America and see that the cost that municipalities or even states spend per student don't necessarily correspond to results. What do you say to that?
I would say that the amount of money that we are putting into the education of our children don't really rise to the needs that our schools have in order to actually provide the best that we can for each of those children. We try very, very hard in all of our school districts, in every school, every teacher within their classroom, to make sure that we stretch the money that is given to us to provide an education for children to the farthest reach that we can make it go. But we have to understand that the world is not cheap. We have to, if we believe that education is the key to success, we have to make sure that we are resourcing it properly and making sure that every child has equity in the funding and the resources that we provide.
When you talk about not enough funding for schools, suddenly everybody's more taxes alarm goes off. That's a pretty tough sell in 2017. How do you begin to make that pitch?
Well, I think that raising revenue is not the only way to resource our schools. Sometimes it's a matter of priorities, whether or not we shift around some funding to make sure that there's enough funding within our schools. And I know that Louisiana has had a very, very difficult struggle with the funding and the budget in Louisiana. But we have to make education a priority. If
you asked me what the biggest problem is, I would think multi-generational poverty is certainly at the beginning of that. Given the lack of funding you say exists, how do teachers suggest that problem be tackled?
It is an extremely complex problem, and I think that you are right. We often talk about success in schools and whether or not schools are A's or F's based on their academic performance. However, there are root causes within our communities that are, as far as I can see, are not being addressed to the extent that they need to be addressed. We need to make sure that we are finding ways to help our families to make ends meet and to provide for the families and for their children and their children's educations. Many of our families are working 2 and 3 jobs and just not able to make those ends meet. As we all know, the cost of living is going up. This impacts our children. What they don't have at home, they're not going to have at school unless the schools provide it.
What kind of changes should students anticipate in fall of 2017?
Well, the new Every Student Succeeds Act does go into place. There's going to be a number of changes in accountability. Children in the classroom probably, and the parents, are not going to feel drastic changes. However, our school districts at the end of the year, once our children are tested, are going to have a major shift in the accountability system. The system right now actually depends very heavily on scores, test scores for children, and that will continue. However, they're adding in a new element called student growth, and it's a little bit complicated to get into on the phone. But it is something new that is coming down, and one of the expected results is that some of our A schools may actually experience a drop in their letter grades. So we probably are going to have to acclimate our parents and our communities to the fact that some of this may actually happen.
Pardon me, but how is that going to affect teachers, teacher salaries, teacher jobs, if a lot of schools that are the highest performing suddenly get that kick?
Well, it's going to be more difficult to go into the communities and actually ask for more money in taxes. It's also going to affect the scores of some of our teachers who have we call it a compass score. It's an evaluation score. Some of that may actually affect the stipends that they receive for their effectiveness rating.
So are you ready? So are you ready for the marches? Are you ready for the protests? Are you ready for the jumping up and down and saying that's not fair?
I am ready for anything that comes my way.
And what is your personal feeling and your organization's feeling about this?
Well, we are not in favor of much of it. I did ask, and I serve on the Accountability Commission. I did ask to see simulations on how it would affect the entire state, and those were not forthcoming. So in the end, I had some very serious concerns about the entire accountability system changing, but it is going forward.
We've got just about 45 seconds or so, and I certainly want to end the interview on something upbeat. Tell me something good, positive about Louisiana schools.
I think that Louisiana schools have some of the most outstanding teachers in the nation. Our faculties, our support persons are doing their very best to make sure that when a child enters our doorways, that they are safe, that they are protected, that they are igniting that curiosity within them to learn. So I think that that's what's really right with Louisiana schools.